So the moment you've identified the reason why you're going to fund what you're going to fund, the business case for that, the research process starts. Why is research, and Bridget mentioned it already within the first hour this morning, the importance of research? Because of the impact of monitoring, evaluation, and impact assessment. I cannot stress enough this impact on the industry sector. Because now everything is scientific, research-based. It's no longer about what the CEO wants or what his secretary wants or the biggest person in the organization. We find that the social investment whole strategy is based on research. Because 5 years down the line, people are going to come and measure that. So at this point in time, the only research kind of word we've used this morning is baseline. But baseline, the question is not just what is a baseline, the question is how do I get to a baseline? What is where do I get that information? So we have established kind of 3 very pertinent research areas for you here. The first one is the social baseline. Okay. Let me explain to you what is the social baseline. This is a very, very important process in the mining industry because it's part of international standards. So a mine operates in a particular province. Nobody decides, okay, what we're going to fund until they know what that province looks like. They want to know how many people lives in that province. They want to know how many schools are in that province. They want to know how many clinics there are in that province. They want to know what does the road and infrastructure look like. They want to know what is the literacy level. They want to know what is the children to teacher ratio. They want to know what is the employment ratio. Why? Because they're going to invest in that area. They want to know 5 years down the line, what is the difference we made in that area? It's a little bit more challenging if you started with a national focus to prove the difference that your little program of 10 million rand made to South Africa. And this is the disjointed outcome of investment versus outcome. It amazes me that companies can claim a 3% pass rate. Because that's effectively what they've done. They've had a science and maths program in two schools in one province, and yet they've improved the pass rates with 10%.
That's cool.
Thank you very much. In that school, in that province, in South Africa. That's the narrative. That's the problem with the narrative we have, is this overclaiming. Based on what? For whom? And that is why the social baseline study is so important. So if you're going to focus on education, what are the indicators, the baseline indicators, that you're going to need to go measure 5 years down the line? Depends on your program. So the point that I want to make here, and I've given you, we use about 75 indicators when we do a social baseline study. And that includes from demographic, who lives in the program, in the province, men versus women, children versus different racial groups. We look at socio-economic factors, economic factors, environmental factors. We look at culture. We look at political dispensation. We look at needs and values. We look at human rights. We look at institutions. So there's a benchmark of about 75 indicators we use to do a social baseline study. And of course, it's going to be skewed depending on where you are with your strategy. If you're only going to focus on education, the whole baseline would be focused on educational kind of things. I'm going to come back to you now, Sandra. Then there's a socio-economic survey. Because we need to know not just what happens in that area or that province or that town or the country you're going to operate in. We need to know specifically from a development perspective what is happening there. Why? Because of attrition. What is attrition? How do I know the difference I made belongs to me? Let me give you an example. Education. So I've increased the pass rates by 10%. I'm so happy for you, but who were the underfunders working in that space? How do I know that 10% belongs to me? Can you see the narrative that's currently being used? So you need to know who the stakeholders are. You need to know who the role players are in that space. And then lastly, you need to know what are the opportunities in that space. Let me give you an example again, because I've started with a province. So a mine operates in the Northern Cape. Let me tell you, it's the poorest province. Okay? We need to know how many people, we need to know how many ambulances, we need to know how many clinics, we need to know the infant mortality rate, the literacy rate, the teacher to learner, all of that. We need to know who are the stakeholders there, because we're going to look for partnerships. And we also need to know what are the opportunities, what are the needs. Because if I go there with my 100 million rand, I need to know I'm going to fund what's required. But how will I know that I speak to a specific requirement? Because what happens in current practice, the organization who shouts the loudest gets the most, and it's government. So let me tell you, in the Northern Cape, the biggest fight is between government and communities if a funder moves in. Who's going to get that money? And if you don't have the research to back up your decisions, you're going to get into conflict situations. Why? Because government will want the money to buy rainwater tanks. But the community needs transport. What are you going to fund? So if you say no to the one, if you have evidence of research, it's so much easier to say no, based on evidence. Otherwise, you're going to be seen as biased. Measure is the impact of that strategy. Let me tell you, if your funding cycle and your strategy is only for 3 years, when you develop a new strategy, you need to develop a new baseline, because everything changes. So what I'm saying to you is your baseline is dependent and directly linked to your funding cycle, before and after. There's a big debate on measurement groups on what do I do, because I can tell you now, 90% of you don't have a baseline study. Can you still measure? Yes, you can, because then your assessment becomes your first baseline to develop from. So to answer your question, as circumstances change, because remember, you contribute with your funds to the change. That circumstance, your social survey is going to change, your baseline, because you're contributing to the change. So you can't keep on using the same data. Here's the problem, however, with data. How often is a census done? Every 10 years. Where are you going to get your baseline data? Stats SA. When do Stats SA get their data? Census. So you're going to work with, now remember her question, how often do I do it? Let me tell you, we don't work with data older than 5 years. But census data is 10 years. So you have to be very sure of your data sources. We very seldom use Statistics SA data. It's just too old. But your cost of data increases because you then have to subscribe to new data sources. So on average, most of our clients is 5 years. Every 5 years. But that presupposes your strategy is a 5-year strategy. Because you want to measure that change that you've set up your strategy to facilitate. And also, because of the cost of data, the cost of social baseline studies, the time and the effort in that, we have a 5-year. I don't know if anybody has a shorter period, but then if you do, I admire you tremendously because of the time and the cost and the effort. So what do you use? 5 years? Anybody longer than 5 years? Because we find CSI strategies are 5-year strategies. Most programs, very seldom programs, are run for longer than 5 years. You do a lot of social baseline studies and socioeconomics. Share with us. How often do you do it? And how long does your client expect it to stand?
You mean us doing it for the university or doing it for clients?
Clients.
Well, also about 5 years. Yeah. But most of the work that we do is to inform a new strategy and so on.
Yeah.
So it's sort of ad hoc
Yeah.
more than anything else.
I do, if you allow me to just say this, not because I'm a consultant, but I do want to say universities provide beautiful opportunities for research at a very good cost. You can either pay me or you can pay him. And what he does, here is the value, shared value being created. His students get experience.
We get research outputs as well.
Okay, so I'm just saying you can choose either to work with me or with him.
Thank you.
No. But here's the point, because I can tell you it, Sandra, I don't want to ask you, but how much do you pay for a social baseline study?
A lot.
Thank you, okay. Like less than 100 or more than 100? More than 100,000. Okay, you charge, you see the point here. Sandra, you must speak to this man. Yeah. So here's the point. I charge much more than that I can tell you. But that's the point that I want to make. There's shared value, there's collective impact and working through university. So I really would encourage you to do that. There's Brenda as well from SAMRA. We belong to the South African Market Research Association. You can get researchers, you can get interns, you can get students, you can get that kind of people, or you can come to people like me, which is going to charge a lot. So at this point in time, I want to show you what a typical strategy would look like. This strategy, no, I want you to understand this. Because of this is the social baseline study, socioeconomic survey. That's baseline. Here's the socioeconomic survey. And here's the research report. The point that Bridget made this morning, 50% of all our work is research-based. Why? Because it's got to stand for 5 years, and after 5 years, somebody's going to come and measure this. So the days are gone that you can write a strategy on a PowerPoint. So I just want to make the point of understand it's not just my reputation, my credibility, but it's you've got to take ownership and accountability for what you said you were going to do because you're going to measure that. And because it's a risk management strategy, it's got to be contained here somewhere. So I'm just saying, I would say over a third of the work is research-based. And another third is engagement. And here's the opportunity, here's the strategy. So I'm just saying to you that the research is the credibility of your strategy. Because here's also, the average strategy cycle is between 3 to 5 years. 5 years down the line, somebody's going to look for the theory of change because they need to now go and measure it. Why did you fund education? Well, based on the learner to teacher ratio is why we focus on teachers and not learners. Because the literacy rate was this. Because the pass rate was this. Because the throughput rate was this. Because we want to know what is the difference we made. So I'm just going to, I made sure that these documents that I brought are at least 3 years old, so just to ensure, confidentiality. But I need you to understand how important this is. It gives credibility also to the practitioner and CSI as a practice. It's not just those little people over there that's spending our money. If we want to talk business, we've got to have the business language. So at that point, just let's look at the total ambit of research. There's other aspects. There's a competitive analysis required. If we look at the financial services, the banks want to make sure amongst themselves, whether you're the red bank or the blue bank or the green bank, your bank has got its own little niche, which assumes you know what your competitors are doing. So there's research. If you want to focus on education, you need to have a handle on what is happening in education. So you need a specific portfolio or focus area benchmark as well. Because that's why we've got duplication. Because we don't know what everybody else is doing in this space. Then there's the portfolio research. Whether you want a new flagship, whether you want to go into a new investment portfolio, you need to understand what are the drivers, what are the critical success factors, which is why education and health is very difficult portfolios at the moment. There's a lot of duplication. There's a lot of evidence it's not working. Why can I tell you that? Because people are without jobs. They come out of a schooling system, they're so badly educated they can't even get an entry-level job. So somebody's doing something wrong. What is that? And that is the portfolio research. And then on top of that, especially if you are mine, remember I spoke about the SLP, the Social and Labor Plan. One critical aspect of that is local economic development. So you need to know what is government doing in your local area. That's part of that opportunity assessment. So every province must have a provincial development plan, which is rolled up into the national development plan, which goes down to a provincial level, which goes down to a local level. So if you want to know all the development activities in the geographic area which you operate, you need to know what is the local development plan of your local municipality. Why is that important? Because for those municipalities to develop it, they had to do stakeholder engagement. So if you get that information, it's going to save you on doing your own needs assessment. Why is that important? Because if government's going to put money in that portfolio, then you're going to double up on expenditure. So there's a lot of needs identified, there's a lot of value in local LDP, local development strategies, and IDPs, integrated development plans for towns, for regions, for provinces, and nationally. Which brings me to the point. If you want to be a practitioner, I believe there's 5 critical skills that you will need going forward. Up until now, recruitment, for those of you in the room, came out of the NPO sector because there's a belief, if the people who know do good, then we just give them a checkbook on this side, then they've got the right heart. So they're going to be good at CSI. The problem with that is that our industry is going backwards. Now, I spoke about I didn't actually speak about one of the biggest skills or issues that in our industry at the moment is the recruitment of business development experts in our industry, particularly in the NGO sector. Why? Because they realize to generate funds, to develop programs, they need to have a business case. They need to do the research, and business developers are doing that. So NGOs are recruiting business developers, but so is the corporate sector. So I'm just saying, going forward, if you need to do a capacity development, or you need to know what training you're going to do next year for your CSI practitioners, the best gift you can give them is a research skill, an evaluation skill, a business development skill, business analysis, engagement, systems thinking, and change management. At this point in time, in my humble opinion, CSI practitioners are relegated to project managers. They manage projects. But to be really effective, you need different skills. So I'm going to just take a gap here to just talk about and ask you, is there any other research from your practice that you're doing, which I haven't included, that you can assist us with? Maybe from an academic perspective, what else do you think would add value to make sure that we fund the best portfolios or focus areas? From a research perspective, I am also on record for academia of being very critical of academia in the country because I believe they don't contribute to building the industry. So if you would like to address that. I just want to make sure that we take a moment to think about the importance of research. Are there any other research that you think that would be good for practitioners to consider? Then I'd like you to share that.
Maybe not anything else, but I think one of the things we might be almost scared to do research, to start with whatever. You might come at the end and realize you didn't change. You didn't change it. Isn't that scary for putting millions in and then afterwards coming to nothing has changed?
Would this be appropriate, the research on needs assessment?
Okay. Richard, I'm going to come back to your question. Just on needs assessment. There's some research, it's not coming from the US or the UK. I think it's really an Africa insight on needs assessments. I think it's the words. And it's the expectations that we create when we talk about a needs assessment. So you nodding your heads. So I don't want to call it a needs assessment. Because if you ask communities what they need, I can tell you there's 10 things they all need. So do we need to engage to do that assessment to come up with that? But what if we call it something else? And some of the new practices that I'm starting to look at is a community asset assessment. Because we assume communities have got nothing, and whatever we're going to do, we've got to give it to them. So what if we think about it differently, we do a community asset assessment? What can they contribute?
So it's not focusing on the negative,
Exactly.
but on what they have.
Please, if you want to, Henry.
So when we do this type of research, we never only look at needs. We always look at the assets as well, because very often you can link the assets to the needs. In other words, you can use the assets to address some of the needs. But our latest thinking is to sort of move away from looking at needs, and these days in our newest projects we look at quality of life and community well-being, and we specifically look at community satisfaction with the different domains of community well-being, because it's an indirect manner to determine needs, but you're not asking what you need, so you're not creating expectations. So it's sort of an indirect and more effective way to determine that. And then just to come back to the other thing, I actually have a question for the colleagues here. So would you use for your engagement and research and evaluation, is it something you do in-house, or do you have to, I know Rihanna does a lot of the work, but do you have that sort of skills in your companies and your NGOs and so on, or do you use? Outsource.
So it comes at a high cost, which is why people aren't doing it. So then, therefore, the question is, going back to the skills you're going to need in the future, if you've got that skills internally, you don't have to outsource. So the point that I want to make here in support of what Henry is saying is capacity development of your own practitioners is going to become critical. Because the less you do, the more you're going to pay in outsource fees, people like me. Because you don't have those skills. So it's a choice. But it's very important. So the reason why you then outsource, it's not a question of insource or outsource, it's a question of how much have you got in your budget. And that's going to make, and that's actually what's going to determine not only who's going to do it, but are you going to do it? And that is then to answer Richard's question. We end up not doing it. And we fly by the seat of our pants.
Even if you can do it, do you have the time to do it?
Yeah, we struggle with that. I mean, we have for Tiger, we're a team of 3 that manages the entire Tiger Brands ACG portfolio across 44 sites and our head office. We just cannot do it. So I think it's a combination of money and capacity.
I also want to mention another thing related to research. So a lot of research that has been done in the sort of corporate space or the NGO space, it sort of end up just being used by that specific corporate or that NGO, and it's not sort of published and shared on a broader level. So it's very sort of in the grey literature, and one of the needs that we've identified is to actually make contributions to, for example, the scholarship of engagement, so that we can do, because companies they spend millions of rands on research, but it only ends up, for their own use. We want to also look at that and see how that can, for example, be used to develop new theory and things like that. So there's a big need to also sort of take that research to a kind of next level and look at these broader themes and things that emerge from that.
And I'm now looking at you because one of the things I've picked up on your Twitter feed is about announcing research. So then I tweeted you back and I asked the Twitter person, I'm saying, I tweeted you back, but I mean your Twitter feed. So I asked, this was my question, wonderful news, is it in the public domain and can I get a copy of the research? So the question here is when we do research, we pay so much for it, but we never share it. So it also means each of us have to do our own research, which increases the cost. So the point is, now I'm asking Bridget, because Bridget, Otiso, has announced this year in education, we're going to release this research report. My question was, I went on the Twitter feed and I asked, wonderful news, is it in a public domain, can I get a copy? Why? So can you share with us why, what was your research subject, and you have announced it publicly, but you're not making it available publicly. I just want to understand, because it's not just Bridget's question, you're all going to be faced with that question.
So that research came out of a particular symposium that we had around inclusive growth. And it was a symposium conference where there was a limited number of delegates, but it was people from business, civil society, as well as academics. And in the end, what we ended up, because some of the speakers obviously basically submitted or spoke on sort of very sort of academic papers that they submitted. So what we found when we started circulating that is that because we didn't make it accessible in the right formats. So it was it essentially ended up being an academic paper. And that's why in the end we actually just basically circulated to the delegates, and we didn't circulate it broader until
I'm just saying, I'm watching you. So I'm looking at Tiger. Clearly, you must have done a lot of research to come up with your focus, your approach, why food security, why nutrition and health. And I have just told you the biggest portfolio growth last year was in food security. So my challenge to you guys is, where's the research? Will you publish the research? Will you publish the outcomes? Okay, will you share with us at least why not?
Sure. So, yes, a lot of research has been done to inform our strategy.
Which you paid for a lot of money?
No, we didn't actually.
Oh, okay. How did you get your research?
So what formed the basis for our business case and the research into the SDGs, the NDP, all of that was done in-house. So with our little team, within our little team. We had to do it because we didn't have a budget to outsource it at the time. So when we underwent this process of revising our strategy, we went, okay, we need to start somewhere. So let's think about who we are, what we do, so what focus should be important to us, and then literally as a little team, what are the guiding documents and priorities that should be helping us decide what we need to focus on. So like I mentioned, MVP, SDGs, K4, BBBEE. And then we went, okay, if those are the priorities, so it was literally our little team going, if those are the priority areas, how do we adjust our strategy so that we're focusing on those things? It's only now that we have been able to form a meaningful business case that we're now able to put forward a budget for next year and say, we want to be able to do an impact assessment, we want to develop rigorous monitoring and evaluation framework. And now we're getting the feedback very slowly to say, okay, we'll give you a little bit more money because we can see that there's some process, some research has went into building some case for what you want to do. So it's been a very slow process, but we've had to start with, we're a team of 3. How do we present something meaningful so that we can grow it in the future and then have some kind of basis to justify us asking for more money to do more research. So we just have to start somewhere.
Thank you. So my question to you is there value in the business case?
Yes.
Is there value in the research? I rest my case. I rest my case. And I just want people to, there's a reason why I tell you this, because I know that, but you know, please don't always just believe me. I'm looking for evidence, research evidence.
I guess over and above what Shakes has mentioned, we also thought, we'd also ideally to engage our stakeholders, in terms of understanding what exactly their needs are. Because obviously, with us just sitting, in one room deciding each and every aspect of what they should be looking for and what we should be giving them, also was quite a challenge, just to understand without them being involved. So involving them, we sort of, held a 3-day workshop at the beginning of the year
So who are those stakeholders?
to understand our NGOs, our partners,
Okay.
the existing partners. So the existing ones that were in our program, we had to understand clearly so that we unpack each and everything if it's according to what the strategy we want to channel it towards.
So you did to back up your research, engagement.
We did do some engagement.
Okay. And you did it with your intermediaries.
Yes.
So may we ask you, what kind of engagement did you have? And what was the input you were looking for from them? Can you share that with us?
So one of the big reasons we engage our partners, and we call our NGO our partners are our beneficiaries. We cannot do what we do without them. They reach our thousands of beneficiaries every month. But it was a platform for us to firstly share the outcomes of our research. So what our thinking was, what we were guided by, and then what we came up with. And then to go, this is what our new strategy looks like. It's a work in progress. Does this hold meaning and value for you in terms of what you know the needs to be are on the ground? You're the ones on the ground. You know what the challenges are, what the priorities are, what the needs are. Is what we're presenting, is it practical? Can it be done? Are we kind of overshooting here? Are we coming in too low? What can you tell us in terms of how we can improve it? Is it meaningful? Is it valuable? And then how would you like to be engaged within this process? So as we implement the strategy, we had to share our expectations. This is what we expect back from our partners and our beneficiaries. We talked about monitoring and evaluation. What kind of support do you need in order to give us meaningful data? And that helped, I think, really streamline our strategy a bit more, because then we were able to say, okay, we see that it's not just about handing out food, it's about starting food gardens, it's about community enterprise development. What does that look like? And then, especially with things like monitoring and evaluation, our partners came back and said, but we don't have the capacity to do this. You're asking us for X, Y, and Z. And then we recognize that part of our program has to be to develop the capacity of our NGO partners so that we're getting data back that is meaningful to us and to them. So that engagement was around a lot of different things, but it was really meaningful because like Kosi said, we can't just sit in a room and think that we know exactly what's going to work well. And it meant a lot to get that feedback so that we knew what was practical and what was going to work, and to manage our expectations and their expectations.
I'm so glad you said
And
that.
it caused like a really sensitivity, especially with the fact that most of those partners were really sort of like a long-term kind of relationship they had with Tiger, and now there's going to be a bit of a rattling now, shaking them, doing things differently. So we were not popular with others because we're now introducing systems in place that some of them are not compatible with, and there'll be some exiting strategy which they've never had before, So it's not an easy task, it's not an easy job, but eventually for business, to run like an oil machine, it has to be there,
And I do want to say the value of research, it gives you the reasons. It takes away the personal. The reason why we exit you is because you're a horrible organization. The reason why we're not going to do this is because it's not working. The value of research is the scientific evidence for decision making. Sorry, yes, sorry. No, please.
I cannot overemphasize how much value that engagement had in terms of the buy-in from our partners. Is here we were going, this is our strategy, we have an exit strategy now, so now we're not going to support you for 10 years, we're going to now start to build up your community, build capacity in the beneficiaries, so that in 3 to 5 years, we're able to withdraw our resources and go to a new community that hasn't been supported. For our partners to understand that process and to see why we were doing it, and what value it had for them, for the country, in terms of the NDP, the SDGs, all of it. It was amazing to see the buy-in. At the end of it all, they went, oh, we totally get it. We understand now why you want to go in this direction. You've got our support. And then they still went through the process of applying, even with the understanding that we would not, our intention is not to support them indefinitely. And that made a huge difference because they didn't then go, oh, this terrible tiger rat is leaving us. They went, okay, we get it. We now understand what the thought process was. Here's the research to back up what we were trying to tell them. Now they're going, okay, we understand, we're willing to come to the table, and we can manage our expectations and you can manage yours. And that was really important. It was very valuable.
So, sorry, Prem, you had your hand up. You've been very patient.
I think I'm partly covered. I'm not in any way negating the value of research. I know it's critical. But sometimes there's also things in your face, and as a social responsibility company, you want to be responsive. So take the fees must fall.
Yes.
And the food insecurity among students, particularly because the government doesn't have enough money for bursaries for the National Financial Aid Scheme. And food allowances have been cut back. So companies have collaborated with universities, maybe by, I think we're coming back to research, by doing the environmental scan, and it's in your face stuff. You know, so what I'm saying is, when you research something, you don't have to start from scratch. Yeah, it's so many variables. Yeah.
Just link with that, and also what you explained. It sounds like you experience a very interesting process, and there must be best practices and lessons learned. And if we take all these best practices and lessons learned, we can then develop an approach, that will add value to more corporate companies. So it's not about sort of sharing your strategy as such, but like things like the process, so that others can learn from it to be more effective and make a big impact on what they are doing.
Yeah. Very happy to do it.
Sorry, I just want to give Charlene a
Sorry, I just want to respond to something that Greg said. I think what you're experiencing is that how your ability to respond and be responsive is either limited or enhanced by your strategy. Sorry, I know that for us it was a very difficult thing, and I think I spoke to Rihanna about it. The approach that we had didn't allow for us to be very responsive to the fees must fall crisis, for example, because of governance and all these other things. So I think if you do research, it's good, and we believe in it as well. But it's a process that stretches over a very long period. But in that process, things pop up that are in your face and that require immediate attention, that feel like it's a little bit off course from your strategy or from the direction that you are trying to take. And sometimes I find that both in our research and both in our strategy that it takes us to, it doesn't give us that agility to say, okay, I know this is my strategy, but this is really important. And we don't have the framework for understanding that. And the world is changing so fast that I know a lot of us, we said that it's a 5-year cycle for strategy. But in that 5 years, there are so many things that happen in South Africa continuously in the social space. You might find that your circumstance reduces the staying power of your strategy, that it's 5 years 3 is not relevant anymore just because things change so fast. So it's a concern I have. I don't have an answer. I didn't really give you an answer, but I have the same concern about how to manage the agility and the responsiveness to your environment.
I think
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
Because I think Rihanna, maybe you will know better being active in this space, is that somehow there is a big gap in terms of what we generally call applied research. Where you conduct research for a specific purpose, the results of which are to be used immediately for a particular solution that you're seeking for. And what comes to mind is that in the country, and generally speaking, maybe some of them might be private entities, while others are government funded anyway. There are institutions, institutes, and other organizations, starting from the CSI, UNICEF's Market Research Bureau, Institute of Race Relations, African Institute, and so on, whose core business is to conduct research and largely applied research. But where I fail to understand why that doesn't get out there to the public domain is because of issues of ownership, intellectual property laws, all those things. Where are the actual blockages for us to easily access this information, because there is a lot of information? Just the last one, for example, you look at the skills development and the sector skills authorities. 21 of them, every year or every other year, they have to conduct extensive research to update their sector skills plans. And they will produce a booklet smaller than this, with a list of skills and critical skills and so on, which tells you really nothing beyond the list that is there. And yet the amount of money that is used to commission, those studies across all sectors, by all the sectors in this country, it goes into billions.
It is.
And you have the National Skills Authority, which has got no database about skills, trajectories in terms of development, training, and so on. What's happening? What is not going right? What are we missing?
It's a very valid question from conducting research, ourselves. It is cost. Just to give you an idea, to conduct a country risk assessment on human rights, there's only one company in the world who's done global research on country risk analysis. So country by country. So they look at South Africa and they say, because of political violence, because of deaths in prisons, because of this is the human rights risk in South Africa. Just to get that one study cost me 50,000 rand. Just that's the price. So I do want to say, firstly, the Institute for Race Relations, which is, I don't want to just say this, but it's the research I use the most because it's an aggregator of research. The subscription for a single license is 40,000 rand a year. I'm just saying, now I haven't done any research, I haven't sold any research, and my subscription rates just to be able to deliver a research service is 75,000 rand. I just wanted to share that with you. There's no way to get access to the human rights, the HSRC's research. I have to outsource it to other people because I don't have the patience for that. So I'm just saying, in Africa, and I'm generalizing, access to information comes at a premium. It comes at a premium. And it's not just commercial, because I believe, well, not what I just believe, but guys, just think about it. There's specific information that's embargoed. one of the statistics is murder rates. Murder rates. I'm just saying, so accessing information in our country and our continent is difficult. Let me give you just another example. So if you look at mortality rates, because of the stigma of HIV, you will not find a death certificate with HIV death on it. I'm just stating the reality for you. So what happens as a result, the incidence rate or the death rate related to cancer or TB goes up. Because it looks better on a death certificate. But is that the reality? So if we get the wrong data, we fund the wrong focus areas with expecting the wrong outcomes. So I'm just saying information and access to research is difficult. It comes at a cost. And it's not only the cost, it's the time lapse that research is done at. So I've told you census is even 10 years. We can't wait for 10 years to know if a program's worked. So just starting to wrap up this session, what we've done so far. I started this morning's session by not looking at all the trends. I very clearly selected the biggest trends which will have the biggest impact on practice. At the moment, you've got the whole research report, every slide is in there, there's 102 slides, there's an executive summary, there's trends, there's forecasts, there's impacts, you can read it. But I wanted to focus on where practice is at. The second section, we looked at the business case, the reason why we do what we do. And then the third session was to look at what supports the development of the business case. Now that we know what we're going to fund, what we're going to focus on in broad, because we've got statistics, we've got data, we've engaged, we've researched, whatever we've done, we've Googled. We've got some sort of semblance of where we're going to go with this thing. So the rest of the day is going to focus on strategy. Today we're going to develop strategy and we're going to focus on the latest impacts, the latest influences. Is that okay with you? So before I close off this morning's session, let me just make sure that we're all on the same page. Are there any questions? Is there any area that's, you're like, I think you've lost me here kind of questions? I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, going in the same direction. Sorry, Richard? It's a lot of pages.
I think, Brianna, I have maybe it's because of the side of the fence I sit on that the splinters in my lap, but I'm still trying to get to grips with the idea of the different pots of money. Yeah, because in fundraising, we see them as very different pots of money. Enterprise development versus SED versus CSI, and how they integrate. And I think that's still missing and might still be.
It's so interesting, and if you allow me, I'm going to say one thing. Because of the fence on which you sit, your whole approach is resource-based. We haven't touched resources yet today, because for us as practitioners, as social investors, it's a means to an end. And that's the biggest difference between the NGO sector and the investment sector. And I'm putting it out bluntly. Because for NGOs, everything is about money. And that's the biggest miscommunication between the investor and the implementer or the intermediary. The last thing the investor thinks about is, what am I going to spend? No. I first want my ducks in a row. So whether we are 3 people, whether we've got 100 million rand, whether we've got 10 portfolios, we're still trying to figure out what we're going to do. All you want to know is, how much money? I haven't, and that's why I want to make this point. This is the biggest difference. For the investor, this is the evolution of social investment. The last thing, how much money? We will find the money. And that's all. I'm also on record for saying the last thing we need in this industry is more money. So I just wanted to say to you, for us, it doesn't matter, because what we as investors, specifically in the corporate sector, have to do is we've got to go and negotiate. We've got to go and beg to get access to that money, because it may or it may not resort under our responsibility depending on the structure of the company. Now, that's the kind of stuff we'll get to tomorrow because of operations. Whether we are, just to answer the question and not leave you in suspense till tomorrow, I can tell you CSI has moved in the business because of governance. So it's gone out of HR, which makes it difficult with the skills development thing. It's gone out of marketing, okay? Where it's currently at, it's one of two words being used, either transformation or corporate affairs. Because of the compliance aspect, transformation, and depending on the kind of industry, it would probably be corporate affairs, a stakeholder-based approach. So corporate affairs, and the way it's structured like that is because you've got investor relations, you've got, all those other stakeholder-based portfolio, and social investment is then the community kind of stakeholder group. So it's an important question you ask. It's an interesting question you ask. But I think it's important to recognize the change in the sector in trying to make sense of strategy, science-based, because of the importance of measurement at the end of the day. We're not going to measure just how much money we're going to spend. We first want to measure the business case, the return on investment indicators, what defines what we're going to focus on. So I think it's a very, very good question you've asked, but I just wanted to not keep you in suspense till we get to budgets. Any other questions? I think you must be tired. I think you must be hungry. We're going to break now till 2 o'clock. We're going to focus extensively on strategy, and then our speaker is going to come in at 3 o'clock, and then we're going to end off with more strategy-related issues this afternoon.